Anthony Murphy is an FM director and consultant who managed the IFM delivery at the nuclear site Sellafield and led the TFM service delivery team for Rolls Royce UK. Anthony's varied career has seen him working across multiple industries and sectors over the last 30 years as both client and service provider, resulting in him founding his own FM consultancy. We joined Anthony to hear more about the iconic sites he's worked on and how he ended up working in FM. Please tell us about your career history and highlights.
So my career history, I left school in the 80s, in 1986. So I didn't have a great education, that was my doing. But I then went on to take on a youth training scheme, which was what was at the time a replacement for apprenticeships. So I started in manufacturing effectively, and was, how would you say, on this scheme for 2 years and training to be an electrician. So that was how I set out, if you like, and that was my aspiration, which was quite short-sighted now thinking about it. But I then went on to get a formal apprenticeship, qualified as electrical engineer, but then by the age of 26 I'd got my first supervisory role, and then by the time I was 30 I was running the department. So quite a transformation. I then went into another role within the same organisation, and that was automated logistics and warehousing. So that was a £22 million construction job, something I hadn't done before. But it also then was my entry into the FM world, because what came with that was I wasn't just responsible for engineering, it was also cleaners, security guards, landscaping, you name it. And all of a sudden, for me, the world of FM was born. I was just like, okay. And FM was still quite a relatively new topic at that point. I did that for 4.5 years, and that was effectively client side. And then I got a opportunity to join Taylor Woodrow Facilities as a regional facilities manager. So that was my move and transition into contract FM, if you like. So a move out of client side into contract FM. And I stayed there for probably another 3 years and moved around and just progressed within FM really, and stayed on the contract side, which was really an eye-opener because it was organisations that effectively made money out of FM rather than it being a service provision on the inside of another organisation. So that was really for me the entry into FM. And then from that, I ended up working all over the country for different organisations, Dow Kia, Mighty, ISS, before starting my own organisation, which was about 2 years ago, my own company.
Please tell us about some of the sites and locations you've worked at.
I consider myself to be extremely fortunate. In the years that I've worked within this industry, I've worked all over the country, literally, in places that I never imagined. So I would say if I chose my top 3, the locations that I've really enjoyed, I've enjoyed loads of them, I could talk all day about them, but the top 3, the first one for me would be Sellafield. So that's up in Cumbria, the nuclear decommissioning site. It was obviously one of the nuclear power establishments, but so I worked there, and that was just fascinating. So there's a level of regulation that you can't begin to imagine that has to be applied to the simplest of tasks. So even if you just wanted to clean something, it needs to be checked for the level of nuclear decontamination or contamination before work can really be, undertaken. Even down to the ecological side of it. You can't just dispose of tree branches or grass cuttings in any normal way because they will contain some level of contamination. So it's a different world altogether, and the scale and the complexity of the site. So they're decommissioning the site, but they're also building buildings on the campus because it's going to take probably about another 150 years to decommission the site. that was what was forecasted. So they've got to build new buildings to house the people that are going to decommission it over the next 150 years. So it's quite an odd, context, but it's fascinating. Just seeing how they bring in nuclear waste from other parts of the world, how they make it safe, and it's just a really unique experience. That's probably top of the kind of list for me. I'd say the next one was working for Rolls Royce Aerospace. So I managed Rolls Royce Aerospace across the UK, and seeing engines constructed, manufactured from components right up to final assembly. So we all see engines on planes, we all go on holiday, but when you see the complexity and the scale of the engineering that goes into making one of those, it's fascinating. And I think this is one thing that for me, I find unbelievably rewarding within FM. So you get a chance to see behind the scenes. So some of these manufacturing facilities, they need cleaning standards similar to an operating theatre, because it can compromise the final component, the final engine. So you do feel part of something a lot bigger when you provide FM in those kind of environments, but they do present unique challenges that you don't find anywhere else. So it gives you real context of British engineering, if you like, and capability. And it does make you feel proud to do what you do, because you feel part of the end result. And I would say the third one was my entry into FM was being given the opportunity to take on a brownfield site, £22 million construction project, which was going to build a semi-automated warehouse and logistics centre within the Midlands, along with the head office facility. So I was part of the client's representative on site, working with the construction team for 10 months, responsible for representing the client, leading fit out, final completion, right through to handover. And then I stayed on that site then for a further 4 years, because everything was brand new. So there was no FM, there was no engineering, there was no services. So they said, would you stay and set that up? So I stayed, and I was the FM department. So I had to get all of the furniture, recruit the people, set up the systems, tender the contracts to get the subcontractors on board. So that for me was almost like a turnkey package of work that lasted about 4 years, four and a half years. And that was, again, really, really rewarding, because when I left that role, I was able to look and say, I'd created that. Not necessarily me and just myself, but I'd left a mark on that it created a sense of pride.
What is your vision for Veritas FM?
My vision for Veritas is to be the leading consultancy that both customers and FM providers feel that they can approach, whether that is to solution a sale or a bid solution at the start, right through to, if a contract or relationship is not where it needs to be, to recovering that. And I do that through a view that there is a real value proposition for both parties. So my vision ultimately for Veritas is to be seen to be adding value back into FM, facilities management. That's not to say that there aren't organisations out there doing it. Doesn't mean that it's not necessarily positioned that way, but I think there's areas where it needs to be improved and can be improved to the benefit of both parties, customer and provider. And that's my vision of Veritas. And that's where I get a sense of satisfaction in saying that it's a valued relationship, and it's a long-term relationship. And if I can help achieve that through the experiences that I've gained over the last 30 years, then I feel like I've done my job, because I think it is a great industry, but I think there's areas where it can be improved.
What is it about FM that made you want to forge a career in this industry?
I would say that, forging a career in this industry was probably something I didn't intend to do. Goes back to probably one of my other positions where I'd progressed, I'd been promoted and been developed within an organisation, and then all of a sudden you were responsible for site services and security guards and all manner of people that were not engineers all of a sudden. So I had to learn different disciplines and then also understand that there was this thing called FM. But in all fairness, that's not said as a negative. It was very much a case of it gave you a different perspective of different challenges and different requirements, all of which were important. So I had to learn about the other disciplines and then also understand that there was a thing called facilities management. So I researched that and decided that actually that was something that was of interest to me, because I think what is underlying to my own personal values, which is something that I represent within my business, is removing roadblocks for people. You know, no matter where you are within an organisation, making sure that you've got what you need to do your job well. You know, whether you're an individual or whether you're an organisation. So that played to my natural strengths. And I thought, oh, okay, well, we need to look at this thing called FM. I applied for a couple of roles and was successful in working for Taylor Wood Road Facilities, what was at the time. And I had a really good line manager, Mark Newell. And Mark explained to me, I suppose, that FM wasn't necessarily just transactional. It was quite a wide industry and there was a lot to it, and that each particular customer would bring with it unique challenges. So whether it was manufacturing, whether it was not-for-profit or retail, they all had their own specific requirements. And I found that to be quite challenging. So I thought, oh, that's quite interesting, actually. So there was a psychological element to it as well as the physical doing the do. So it enticed me in that way. And I just progressed with it really, and I moved from organisation to organisation, took on different customers and broadened my own experience across a whole range of different sectors. And that, I suppose, is what's kept me challenged and kept me interested. So that's how I've come to forge the career.
Do you have any advice for young people starting out in FM?
I do. I think a bit like my prior answer really, I find FM is quite situational, but it's extremely broad. So what I would say to somebody who was starting out in FM is it might not necessarily be a fit to begin with. You know, you might take on a role, be that with a customer or a specific place within a team. That might not necessarily feel like a fit, and it might be that it doesn't play to your strengths. So your natural kind of thought pattern might be, oh, this is not for me. My advice would be explore what FM has to offer, look at alternative customers, alternative opportunities, alternative situations. Because as has been for my career, each unique contract, each unique customer, each unique organisation has called for different things from me. Some of which have played to my strengths, some of which have not played to my strengths. So I have learned over a number of years that if it's not a fit, you can find a fit, but it's like any role, you'll only get out what you put in. But my advice underlying to that would be explore and understand the industry and understand what matters to you. You know, how do you see yourself adding value and where are you best placed to add that value? And there is a place out there for you, but you've got to find it. It's not necessarily that it will just land in your lap. That would be my advice.